Another horrific mass shooting in Texas. We'll talk all about the response by the media, the left, and the Republican Party, plus mystery in Saudi Arabia. What the hell is going on over there? And civil war in the Democratic Party. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. It's another really dark weekend. I mean, just terrible things happening, it seems, all across the planet. So well done, everyone. But there is the worst of all the things, obviously, is what just happened in Texas. And I'm going to give you the full rundown and why it is that the left constantly jumps to particular positions with regards to guns and the right jumps to different positions with regards to guns, what this says about their different views of human nature in just a second. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at Ring. So Ring's mission is to make neighborhoods safer. I have a Ring video doorbell at my house. Basically what it does is every time somebody rings the doorbell, I am notified on my phone. I can be 3,000 miles away. I can talk to the person. I can activate an alarm. I can make sure that my house is safe even when I am not at home, which is great because most of the people who are trying to break into your house will try to ring the doorbell first, see if someone's home, and then break in. Ring makes sure they can't do that anymore. Well, now Ring knows that home security doesn't end at the front door, so they've created what they call the Ring Floodlight Cam. Just like Ring's amazing doorbell, the Floodlight Cam is a motion-activated camera and floodlight that connects right to your phone with HD video and two-way audio that lets you know the moment anyone steps on your property. You can see, speak to visitors, even set off an alarm directly from your phone. You'll know if somebody is trying to make trouble in your neighborhood if you get the Ring Floodlight Cam, and also if you have the Ring Video Doorbell. It's the ultimate in-home security. Save up to $150 off a Ring of Security kit when you go to ring.com/Ben. Again, that's ring.com/Ben, ring.com/Ben, and you save $150 off a Ring of Security kit. It's just terrific. Our family has purchased additional services from Ring because they do such a wonderful job. Ring.com/Ben, super user-friendly products and at an affordable price. Again, save $150 off the Ring of Security kit when you go to ring.com/Ben. Okay, so here is what we know about what happened in Sutherland Springs. So yesterday morning, at least Pacific time, this horrific story breaks that 26 people have been slain at a church in Texas. 12 to 14 of those were children. There are pregnant women who were shot. Basically, there are 50 people in church. It looks like half of them were murdered and half of them were injured in this particular shooting. The shooter is a guy named Devin Patrick Kelly, and he is the gunman. He apparently committed a week before he committed the worst massacre at a place of worship in American history. He posted a photo, this is according to Daily Beast, of a semi-automatic rifle to Facebook with the caption, "She's a bad bitch." It's part of a disturbing picture emerging of the 26-year-old who was discharged under dishonorable circumstances from the Air Force in 2014, according to Defense Department records. Now, contrary to some of the factual kind of accounts that are going around, a dishonorable discharge is not the same as being discharged under dishonorable circumstances. One means that your weapon is automatically banned, one does not. But in this case, it doesn't make any difference because the reason he was discharged was apparently for domestic battery. Apparently, he committed violence against his wife and their child in November 2012, and he was sentenced with a bad conduct discharge, 12 months confinement, and 2 reductions in rank to basic airman, according to an appeals court decision in 2013 that affirmed the decision against Kelly. Well, what that means is that under Texas state law, you're refused the capacity for a concealed carry permit. Under federal law, you're banned from buying a gun if you commit a domestic violence, if you're convicted of a domestic violence assault. This was a domestic violence case, so he was banned by law from owning this gun as far as we know. It didn't matter. He was still able to obtain it anyway. He entered First Baptist Church at approximately 11:30 a.m. Sunday, opened fire. Officials said he wore a ballistic vest and was dressed all in black, so he was ready to go. A law enforcement source close to the investigation said that the rifle he used is similar to the one pictured. They couldn't confirm it was the same rifle. He exited the church, and he dropped his rifle, and he was then pursued by a civilian with a shotgun and died near the city of New Berlin. Apparently, he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but it was thanks to the neighbors arriving and shooting at him. So here's some of the things that the neighbors were saying after all of this happened. Here's a witness talking about a citizen who stopped the massacre.
I pulled up to the intersection where the shooting happened, and I saw 2 men exchanging gunfire, the other being a citizen of the community, and the shooter of the church had taken off, fled in his vehicle, and the other gentleman came and he said we needed to pursue him, that he just shot up the church, and so that's what I did. I just acted.
Okay, and another witness talked about this. They talked to one of the armed citizens who stopped the massacre. Here's what he had to say.
That suspect crossed the street to the church, exited his vehicle, and began firing at the church. That suspect then moved to the right side of the church and continued to fire. That suspect entered the church and continued to fire. As he exited the church, A local resident grabbed his rifle and engaged that suspect. The suspect dropped his rifle, which was a Ruger AR assault-type rifle, and fled from the church. Our local citizen pursued the suspect at that time.
Okay, so this is what's, there are a lot of people who immediately jump to gun control, but one of the things that is important to recognize here is that it was an armed citizen, a guy with a gun, a good guy with a gun, who showed up to stop the bad guy with the gun. Apparently there were two good guys with guns who showed up to stop the bad guy with the gun. We still don't know the details of exactly what happened inside the church. Was anyone armed inside the church? Was there any security at the church? I've been an advocate for a long time that places of worship should have armed security there. Maybe that's just because I'm a part of the Jewish community. It's very, very common inside the Jewish community to have armed security. We have several security guards at the place where I worship. Every major synagogue in Los Angeles has many security guards, specifically because of the threat of violence like this. But all of the people on the left immediately respond by suggesting gun control is the answer, even though the reality is that it was illegal for this guy to own guns in the first place. According to the U.S. Code, there are restrictions already on possession of firearms by individual convicted of a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence. This is Title 18 U.S. Code Section 922G9, the so-called Lautenberg Amendment in the fall of 1996, and it banned the possession of firearms by individuals convicted of a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence. In this case, he was convicted of a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence against his wife and his child. The fact that he still had a gun demonstrates that just because there are laws on the books doesn't mean that bad people will obey them nonetheless. So it is a good thing that there were good people with guns there to at least stop him before he could go to another location and begin trying to murder people there. Just a horrific, horrific event. Now, last week we talked about whether it was appropriate for President Trump to talk politically about what had happened in New York City after a terror attack, and he was talking immigration. And you remember the left said, how dare he politicize? How dare he politicize? Well, they could not wait to politicize this, as always. I mean, just like the Las Vegas shooting, they could not wait to politicize. So Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, who's sort of considered the gun control guy on the left after Sandy Hook, he issued a statement saying that lawmakers, quote, need to think about whether the political support of the gun industry is worth the blood. So this is just a lie, this idea that everyone who supports gun rights is beholden to the gun industry. I was supportive of gun rights long before we had any advertisers who were pro-gun. I've been pro-gun rights my entire adult life. Virtually everyone who's ever been on the right has been pro-gun and is not being paid by the gun industry. The reason that the NRA is so prominent is not because the gun industry is paying the NRA. It's because there are millions and millions of people who are members of the NRA who join voluntarily because maybe they're afraid that the left tries to grab guns and suggest that guns ought to be grabbed every time something bad happens. And they think, well, if I were in that church, I wish that I would have had a gun too. Okay, here's the statement from Chris Murphy. Again, there's been no talk on the left, none, about why this is inappropriate, why he shouldn't be talking this way. He tweeted, he put out a statement, said, the paralysis you feel right now, the impotent helplessness that washes over you as the news of another mass slaughter scrolls across the television screen isn't real. It's a fiction created and methodically cultivated by the gun lobby, designed to assure that no laws are passed to make America safer because those laws would cut into their profits. Again, cut into the NRA's profits? The NRA doesn't sell guns. They don't sell guns. How would that cut into the NRA's profits? If you ban, people with misdemeanor violent crimes against family from owning guns, which we already have, would that seriously interfere with the NRA in any way? Would that even seriously interfere with the profit margins of gun dealerships? I think not. He said, this is again Chris Murphy, my heart sunk to the pit of my stomach once again when I heard of today's shooting in Texas. My heart dropped further when I thought about the growing macabre club of families in Las Vegas and Orlando and Charleston and Newtown who have to relive their own day of horror every time another mass shooting occurs. Now, one of the things that I think is worthwhile noting here, before we even go any further and talk about some of the myths that are being purveyed by folks on the left with regard to this shooting, I think it's important to note that the left and right treat terror attacks and acts of violence in very, very different fashion. The left assumes that human beings are basically good. Human beings are basically good. And therefore, if you pass a law, most people will obey that law. And that if you don't pass the law, basically, human beings as restrained by the state are basically good. That there won't be a bad guy who breaks the law and goes out and gets a gun. And therefore, because human beings are inherently good, we don't need to worry about somebody breaking the law. And the best thing to do would basically be for everyone to put down their arms. On an international level, this leads to the sort of pacifism that led to the anti-nuke movement, the idea that if we unilaterally disarm, we will create a world without nukes. And you saw some of this kind of pie-in-the-sky stuff from President Obama when he was Senator Obama. The right thinks something different. People on the right tend to think in religious terms and natural law terms that human beings are capable of both great good and great evil, and that a bad guy with a gun is separated from a good guy with the gun by the fact that by the fact that one is good and one is bad. They're not separated by the gun. They are separated by the fact that one is good and one is bad. And this is the problem: is how do you group these people? So if the left sees two guys with guns, the left's first instinct is to say the guns should be taken away from both of them. The right's first instinct is to say, well, who are they? Right? Is the guy on the right a cop? Is the guy on the right good? Is the guy on the right a preacher? Is the guy on the right a doctor? Is the guy on the left a vagrant with a violent history? Like, we have to separate by human being whether or not that person should have a particular capacity. The right tends to look to the vagaries of human nature when they see sin and evil, and the left tends to look to the implement of violence. Now, I think there's a halfway position that there are a lot of people who adopt. They say, okay, human beings can be good, human beings can be bad, but there are some guns that are too dangerous for even a good human being to own. I think most people agree with that with regards to, for example, fully automatic machine guns, which have been banned in the United States, at least new sales of those since the 1980s. And there are a lot of people who feel the same way about, everyone owning a tank. I think that's reasonable and rational. That's where you can have reasonable, rational discussion, is which weapons are too dangerous that the risk outweighs the benefit, right? The risk outweighs the reward. But that's not the conversation the left wants to have. The left wants to have the conversation basically that all guns are bad because the same exact weapon that was used to gun down these people at the church was probably used by one of the civilians in order to fire at the bad guy running away from the scene. Right, the AR, the Armalite rifle, is the most commonly used rifle in the United States. Okay, it's not, AR does not stand for assault rifle, and I think that it's important to note all this because you have to make a decision as a human being. Are you worried more about the character of the people that we produce in the United States, or are you worried more about the capacity of people of any stripe to get weapons like an AR? I'm not particularly worried about me owning an AR or my friends at the office owning an AR or millions of people owning an AR. I am worried about somebody who's been convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence owning an AR, a handgun, a knife, or a toothpick. And I think all of these things are dangerous. So I'm going to talk in a second about some of the myths that the left has immediately begun to purvey online. One of them is, I think, really dangerous, and another of them is actually just vile. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at My Patriot Supply. So getting prepared for emergencies should not be tough. The government suggests that when you are in an emergency, you should have at least some supply of food available to you. Right? You should at least have some supply of food in case you can't get to the grocery store, in case you're blocked, in case the grocery store is sold out, in case the government can't get to you. We've had wildfires and floods. We've had tornadoes and hurricanes this season. And that's why it's important that you at least have enough emergency food to get through a few days. That's why My Patriot Supply helps you prepare by giving you a 102-serving survival meal kit for only $99. 102-serving survival food kit, $99. Breakfast, lunches, and dinners shipped to your home for free. Call 888-803-1413, 888-803-1413, or go online to preparewithben.com. Again, that's preparewithben.com. It lasts up to 25 years in storage. Folks at the office who have tried it say it tastes good, tastes like home cooking. Preparewithben.com. 888-803-1413. For $99, you're keeping your family safe. It seems like a no-brainer to me. Again, preparewithben.com. That's preparewithben.com. Okay, so as always, people run to Twitter to say the dumbest things they can think of. And basically, this is broken down along two lines. Line number one is the political, and line number two is the spiritual. So they're sort of intertwined on the left, but there's a slight difference. So on the political side, there are a bunch of folks on the left, like Alyssa Milano, who just put out stuff that is not true about guns. So here's what Alyssa Milano wrote. And again, she's now seen as some sort of political figure, which is amazing. I'm not sure why being on Charmed makes you an expert on guns, but apparently, I have much to learn about witchcraft and also ignorance about firearms. Alyssa Milano writes, "There are no background checks on long guns, AR-15s in Texas. Thanks for the info, Shannon and Watts. This is untrue. This is a lie. There are background checks on long guns in Texas. In fact, this guy went in, he actually got a background check, and then he received a gun anyway, even though he was already federally barred from owning a gun. So yes, there are background checks. As I have said, there are universal background checks across the United States when you buy from a federally licensed firearms dealer. Every federally licensed firearms dealer, every FFL in the United States, must perform background checks on you before giving you a gun. Okay, the only ones that are not policed this way are so-called hand-to-hand transactions. I want to sell a gun to Mathis, and so I can sell a gun to Mathis without going through a federal background check, because then I would have to go to a store and I'd have to run a background check, and it would put the onus on me. And in reality, it's impossible to police, except, on the way back, basically. If Mathis were to go and shoot somebody, that wasn't me, presumably, and then they would back trace where the gun came from, then they could prosecute me. But prospectively speaking, there's no real way to prevent people from selling each other firearms in private Federally licensed firearms dealer a bigger issue because they can be audited at any time by the federal government. So this is just not true from Alyssa Milano. This is also idiocy from Chelsea Handler. Chelsea Handler, again, another one of these political experts who knows everything there is to know about politics, including the fact that Dana Rohrabacher is actually a woman. She tweets, quote, "Innocent people go to church on Sunday to honor their God and while doing so get shot and killed. What country? America. Why? Republicans." Well, no. It turns out that the shooter in this particular case is actually a militant atheist. And if you go to his Facebook page, it is covered with militant atheist slogans. He's apparently on the left, on the political left. He went to a church and murdered all of these people. Apparently, he'd been speaking negatively about religious people for a long time. So you have an atheist who goes and shoots up a church, and the first instinct is to blame Republicans, which makes no sense at all. The idea here, of course, is if it were up to Democrats, then they would ban guns all the way. Now, I would suffice it to say that if it were up to the left, there wouldn't be as many people going to church on Sunday to honor their God, period. But that's a story I'm going to get into in just a second. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution provides a right to keep and bear arms. The founders knew that it was important that human beings be able to keep arms in order to resist tyranny from governments, foreign and domestic. This is why you were actually mandated in certain states in the United States, in the early colonies, to own a gun in your home. Mandated. Because in order to be a member of the militia, you had to own a gun. It was your job to obtain a gun. This is not uncommon in Switzerland. They basically have similar laws, essentially. But the idea that it's Republicans' fault when a bad guy goes and shoots up a church is really sick. I've never said it's Democrats' fault when a guy goes and shoots up a congressional baseball game. In fact, I defended Bernie Sanders when that happened. This is pretty pathetic from Chelsea Handler. But unfortunately, it's a widespread sentiment, and it's not just held by Chelsea Handler. Joy Reid, who makes a living being wrong about everything, she blocked me on Twitter, so I had to see this through somebody else's account. She says, "Enough with the thoughts and prayers already." Paul Ryan had tweeted out, "Reports out of Texas are devastating. The people of Sutherland Spring need our prayers right now." Now, whenever a Republican says prayers, because Republicans actually take prayer seriously, folks on the left lose their minds. How dare they say prayers? They could act right now to stop all this. What, are you just going to pray? You just want to sit around and pray? That's your thing, to pray? Okay, so this demonstrates a full-fledged failure to understand what prayer is for on a couple of levels. But Joy Reid tweets out, "Enough with the thoughts and prayers already. The Bible teaches us that faith without works is dead. Do something or say nothing." So first, a bit of irony. These people were shot in the middle of prayers. They were shot and they were murdered in the middle of their prayers. And here you are saying that no one should pray for them. I'm pretty sure that the people who would be most certain to want other people to pray for them would be people in a church who are shot. I'm fairly certain that's the case. You didn't hear this sort of stuff after the massacre in Charleston, South Carolina, the massacre at the Black church. You didn't hear a lot of this, don't say thoughts and prayers. Stop saying thoughts and prayers. You didn't hear it as much because it was Barack Obama in power, and Barack Obama was saying things like, we should express our thoughts and prayers, right? And then he went down there and he sang Amazing Grace. Imagine if Trump went down to Sutherland Springs and sang Amazing Grace. The left would go ballistic. Obama did, but because Obama was pushing their favorite policy positions, that meant that his prayers were genuine, you see. Because according to the left, you're a bad person if you disagree with them, and so your prayers are worthless. We can't disagree on politics and both pray. Our prayers are worthless unless we agree with you on the politics of the situation. So she's not the only one saying this. Keith Olbermann is saying this too. He says, "Speaker Ryan, bluntly, shove your prayers up your ass and do something with your life, besides platitudes and power grabs." Okay, so number one, if you're going to tell people not to do something, and then what you probably shouldn't do is say do something with your life besides platitudes and power grabs in a tweet that is purely platitudinous and is clearly also a power grab. I mean, Keith Olbermann would like to grab a certain amount of power from the American people by seizing guns. This idea that prayers, if I pray for you, that's something terrible is just ridiculous. So prayers serve a number of purposes. I've talked about this more in the Bible segment than I have in the main of the show. But as a religious person who prays 3 times daily, thrice daily, and then I say prayers before and after my meals, I say blessings before the meals and after my meals. We say a lot of blessings in Judaism. So we're constantly blessing God. We're constantly praying in Judaism. It's a thing. There are a few reasons for prayer. One of the reasons for prayer is to steel yourself. Steel yourself. It's for you less than it is for God. God doesn't need you, and he doesn't need your prayers. But you need your prayers. Why? To steel you for doing things. So the idea that prayer is only about prayer, that you pray and then you go about your daily business, that's not right. One of religion's sort of basic premises is that it is your job as a human being when you see bad things happening in the world to recommit yourself to being a better person. That's what prayer helps you to do. It helps you to confess what you've done wrong. It helps you to realize what you could do better. It helps you realize that you were created by a creator who cares about you and cares about other people. And are you doing honor to his creation? And it helps you go out and do better things with your own life. Second, there is a belief in Judaism and Christianity that God hears your prayers and acts because of them. Not, as I've said, because God is reactive to you, not because God needs your prayers, but because you have changed as a human being, and we can change as a country if we pray together. We are more unified, and God responds to that, right? That's sort of the idea in Jewish and Christian communities. It's true in Muslim communities, I assume, as well, that if you pray to God, then you are signifying your subservience to God, and God responds favorably to that. So we actually believe that prayers do something. They're not just spewing empty words. And there is a great irony to all of these people spewing empty words on Twitter and saying, how dare you talk to God? Like, there you are talking to your imaginary sky being, but here I am on Twitter tweeting to no one. But I'm doing something because I tweeted. I promise you, my prayer did more than your tweet. My prayer did more than Keith Olbermann's tweet here, especially because what he's actually doing is driving the country apart. If you want to create a consensus based on anything here, you can't insult everybody who prays in the United States. It's like 80% of Americans pray at some point. So that's silliness. It's not just him. The sort of scorn that a lot of people on the left feel for religion is pretty palpable. Again, recognize the irony here. An atheist shoots up a church, and the first thing that people are saying on the left is stop praying. That seems like bad politics. Very, very bright. Stephen King did the same thing. He basically said, it's time to stop praying, and he dropped the G. It's time to stop praying and start legislating, and get rid of the other G as well. A couple of things. One, again, it was illegal for this man to hold guns from all that we know. Okay, so more legislation would not have stopped that. And two, if you really want to show the scorn that you have for the American people by dropping G's in praying and legislating, look at those hicks. With their praying, with their Jesus and their Bible, those were the hicks that were shot. Right? I mean, those were the quote-unquote hicks that were shot. They were people who lived in Texas. In all likelihood, the parents of these children voted for President Trump because Texas went heavily for President Trump. It was a very small town. These are people going on a Sunday morning to pray. It's horrific. It's horrific. And for people to sit around ripping, they're like, would you hear this ever if God forbid, a mosque had been shot up? Would you ever hear this? A mosque gets shot up, would you hear people saying, all these people should stop praying to Allah. They should stop praying to God for Muslims who are shot. Of course you wouldn't hear that. It's just scorn for Christians that really drives a lot of this, and that's really kind of gross. Okay, so in other news today, by the way, this is not the only violent story of the day. Yesterday or Saturday, Senator Rand Paul was actually attacked on his own property by a guy who's a registered Democrat. We're still waiting to hear all the details, but the guy broke 5 of Rand Paul's ribs. 5 of them. Okay, that's not a minor injury. Breaking a rib, you can't actually bind a rib. My dad cracked a rib one time, and it is extraordinarily painful. And they can't put you in a cast. So you're basically walking around suffering because your ribs are poking you in the lungs. It's really awful. And this guy broke 5 of Rand Paul's ribs. And there may be more to the story. We'll hear about it. But if not, then this is just another left attack on a Republican politician. And imagine if Bernie Sanders had been tackled and broken 5 ribs. Would that lead every newscast ever? Yes. Remember, there was a congressional baseball shooting. That was in the news for like 4 days, and it was out. You want to look at media bias? Look at how these shootings get treated. The variety of how the shooting... Is it useful to the left's agenda? Is more of a judge than is it newsworthy? Bernie Sanders being tackled by a right-winger would be newsworthy, and it would also serve the left's agenda. It would never leave the news. Rand Paul gets tackled, breaks 5 ribs on his own property, and by a Democrat, and nothing. Nothing. I mean, I had to find this on Twitter. It wasn't even covered anywhere. It's ridiculous. Okay, so I want to try to elucidate some foreign policy news in just a second because it's quite fascinating what's going on over in Saudi Arabia. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at Skillshare. So Skillshare is the best way for you to make your resume better. It's the best way for you to learn new skill sets that make you more marketable in your job, in your community. If you're looking for a leg up at work, Skillshare is how you do it. 3 million members, 17,000 classes. It's the Netflix for online learning. You can take classes in graphic design, DSLR photography, social media marketing. It's perfect. It's perfect if you're looking to build your career or start the side business of your dreams. I have taken, as I say, a watercoloring class, which helps calm me in the evenings. But beyond that, I've also taken a class in email marketing and social media marketing. All of their classes are like 45 minutes, and they are really excellent. Very user-friendly. Skillshare is giving my listeners right now a 1-month free trial of unlimited access to over 17,000 classes. Go to Skillshare.com/Shapiro. Again, that's Skillshare.com/Shapiro to start your free month today. Skillshare.com/Shapiro. you can't afford to sit around thinking you're going to be able to retain your job with your skill set. Your skill set isn't good enough. Keep making it better with Skillshare.com. Skillshare.com/Shapiro. You get a free month. Check it out. You're going to want to continue the service because it's really terrific. Okay, so meanwhile, mysterious happenings in Saudi Arabia. And it looks a lot like The Godfather, basically. Okay, it looks essentially like Michael Corleone basically cleaning up events after his dad dies, right? I mean, Clemens is going around shooting people in elevators is basically what's happening here. So, over the weekend, all of these events happen. I'm going to tell you the events and then why I think they're happening and what I think is going on. We could be 5 minutes away from a full-on Saudi-Sunni versus Iranian-Shia internal Middle East conflict. We could be looking at another war in the Middle East in very short order, and there's a significant possibility the United States ends up dragged into it in some way, so I think it's important stuff. So here's what happened over the weekend. So Saudi Arabia is basically being taken over by a 32-year-old young new prince. This 32-year-old guy is considered a reformer. He is as I say, he is a kid, and he has formed a newly formed anti-corruption committee. Over the weekend, they arrested at least 17 princes and top officials. So they basically went around arresting people. The list includes Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. You've heard his name. He's an investor in Kingdom Holding, which 95%. He owns 95% of that. It owns stakes in Citigroup, Twitter, Apple, Fox News, right? Well, News Corp, right, which is the parent company of Fox News. After he was arrested, $750 million was wiped off of his fortune on Sunday. At least 38 former current deputy ministers have been arrested on accusations of corruption. CNN has obtained the list of 17 people, including the former head of the royal court, Khaled al-Tuwairi, the Saudi media mogul, a guy named Walid al-Ibrahim, and Prince Turki bin Nasser. Okay, so all of this is basically the new guy coming in and arresting all of the people who could potentially pose a threat to him. Badr Asakar is the bureau manager of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and he tweeted the list of arrested business people. 3 ministers were removed from their positions. Tens of former ministers were detained as part of the new anti-corruption campaign initiated by King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. So the new king, who replaced King Fahd after King Fahd died, his son is basically running the show, and his son is this crown prince that we are talking about, this Mohammed bin Salman, right? Because King Salman is the king over there. So the 3 ministers removed were the economy and planning minister, the National Guard minister, and the Naval Forces commander. And they said that they needed to do this due to the propensity of some people for abuse, putting their personal interest above public interest and stealing public funds, and will trace and combat corruption at all levels, according to the release. The 32-year-old crown prince does have the authority to investigate, arrest, issue travel bans, freeze the assets of those it finds corrupt. So in the last few months, he has eased some restrictions on women. He's supposedly a modernizer. He's eased some restrictions on women. He's allowed them to drive, for example. And he has vowed to destroy, quote, extremist ideologies in a bid to return to a more moderate Islam. So he's considered a reformer, and he is making some moves. Okay, so what are some of the other moves that he's making? I mean, it's really astonishing, all the stuff that happened over the weekend. It's really kind of creepy and astonishing at the same time. Prince Mansour bin Mukrin is the deputy governor of Asir province, which is a major province in Saudi Arabia. He's returning from an inspection tour when his aircraft was downed near Aba late on Sunday, according to the Interior Ministry. He is dead, 7 other officials dead in this helicopter crash. Why does that matter? Because this guy is basically the lead rival to this Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So it's obviously an attempt to cement power. If you know, this is suspicious as it looks. This particular province exists on the kind of southernmost tip of Saudi Arabia. Yemen exists just to the south. We'll talk about Yemen in just a second because that's you know, important too, and there's news out of there as well. Basically, this guy's father, the guy who was just killed, I mean, it looks like, I would say, suspicion is that he was murdered. You know, helicopters don't randomly go down in the middle of a purge. This guy's father was the lead rival to King Salman. So Prince Mansour bin Mukrin was kind of the next heir to the throne if the other guy had gotten picked. Okay, so that's another thing that's happened. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is accusing Yemen of firing an Iranian ballistic missile into Saudi Arabia over Riyadh. Okay, so they're essentially saying that there was Iranian technology in this missile fired from Yemen into the heart of Saudi Arabia. They said they intercepted a ballistic missile over the capital, according to CNN, and now they are accusing the Iranian government of having provided the technology that was in that missile. Now, Saudi Arabia and Iran have been in basically a proxy war in Yemen for at least a couple of years here. It was the U.S.-made Patriot system that shot down the missile. There have been about 14,000 civilian casualties in Yemen, 5,000 people killed from the beginning of the fighting into late August. And again, Saudi Arabia has been very active because they are concerned with being surrounded by an Iranian proxy on their southern border. So this also looks like, more provocation. And finally, this is the final piece of Saudi Arabia news. Then I'm going to explain what exactly the hell is going on here, because this is all very mysterious, and it does have some significant ramifications for the United States. The Lebanese Prime Minister is a guy named Saad Hariri. Okay, his father was murdered by the Iranians, basically. His father was killed, I believe it was in 2005, by the Iranians. And there have been basically a couple of revolutions, one called the Cedar Revolution that was a response to the Iranian presence in Lebanon. Lebanon is a country, for those who don't know, just to the north of Israel and just to the west of Syria. It has basically become a Syrian proxy state, an Iranian proxy state. But the Cedar Revolution was an attempt to move Iran out of Lebanon. And in the meantime, what has basically happened is that the new prime minister is a guy named Saad Hariri, who, again, he's a Sunni guy. He's not Shiite like the Iranians, and he has formed a coalition government involving Hezbollah as well. Well, now that is breaking up. So the Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri resigned on Saturday during a trip to Saudi Arabia. He said his life was in danger. It created a leadership vacuum in Lebanon. Hariri said he feared an assassination plot, accused Iran of meddling in the region, causing devastation and chaos. He said Iran controls the region and the decision-making in both Syria and Iraq. I want to tell Iran and its followers it will lose in its interventions in the internal affairs of Arab countries. The Iranians are accusing the Saudi Arabian government and President Trump of coordinating Hariri's resignation in order to exacerbate tensions. They said the resignation was aimed at creating tension in Lebanon and the region. The resignation was also meant to compensate the U.S. for its failures after the defeat of ISIS. And Hariri also pointed to Hezbollah, which is a terrorist group that has threatened Israel as well as Sunni targets and Jewish targets all over the world. So a lot going on in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to explain all of it. But for me to explain it all and elucidate it all and why it's important to you, you're going to have to go over to Daily Wire right now for the latest news. So $9.99 a month gets you a subscription to dailywire.com. That gets you a subscription. You can watch the rest of my show live on video. You can watch the rest of Michael Knowles' show live on video, Andrew Klavan's show live on video, all worthwhile. Plus, you can be part of my mailbag on Fridays. Also, if you get the annual subscription, then you get this, the very greatest in all beverage vessels, $99 a year. So you save off the monthly subscription. The leftist tears hot or cold tumbler. I see people tweeting it at me because they love it so much, as well they should, since it is magnificent. What a piece of hardware this is. $99 a year gets you the annual subscription plus this, and there will be discounts in the Shapiro store, which, as I say, will be coming in the near future. Also, be sure to tune in to watch our next episode of The Conversation on Tuesday, November 14th at 5 p.m. Eastern, featuring the godless Michael Knowles. That's not true. Michael is a religious guy, but the God-forsaken Michael Knowles, is that fair? Yeah. Maybe? Okay, God-forsaken. Michael's conversation will stream live on the Daily Wire Facebook page and the Daily Wire YouTube channel. It's free to watch for everybody, but only subscribers can ask the questions. I'm subscribing just so I can ask Michael questions like, why do you still work here? Subscribe today to ask Michael questions and join the conversation as well. Go ahead and check it out. All the conversations are a lot of fun. I've done one. Klavan's done one. Michael's doing one now. So go and check it out. If you just want to listen later, subscribe to our YouTube channel or go over to SoundCloud or iTunes. Subscribe there. Leave us a review. We are the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast in the nation.